Australia, we are the greatest country on earth. We are the envy of the world. We have space, resources, the rule of law, relative peace and stability. And that's not to say we're perfect, because we're most certainly not. However, relative to the rest of the world, we've got to be thankful that we live in this country. But it's easy to take what we have for granted. After all, it's been the land of opportunity and a great place to live for the past 233 years. But none of us should assume that what we've enjoyed is actually a permanent part of Australian life. There are forces at work intent on dismantling some of the most precious elements of our societal fabric. That's our social cohesion, our relative freedoms, our individual choice, the property rights that we have, and our God-given rights. Our weekly news is filled with a variety of race-baiting fantasists who see systemic oppression based on colour or ethnicity wherever they look. Wherever they see racism under every roof, I see a nation that is largely colourblind, but steadfastly refuses to be behaviourally blind. Because we're right to judge people on their own behaviour. After all, behaviour needs to have consequences: legal, moral, personal and public. We, you and me, are no more responsible for the appalling conditions, the domestic violence, the health abuse and the sexual abuse in some Australian communities than we are for tribal wars in the middle of Africa, for example. And if we're serious about closing health gaps across the nation, it's actually pretty easy. Here's the prescription: don't smoke, don't drink yourself into a daily stupor, eat healthy foods, stay slim, bathe daily and exercise. And if some Australians ignore that mantra and suffer health consequences as a result, well, that's not our fault either. And here's another tip for the perpetually indulged and outraged. If you want more money, try getting a job. Or if you have one, learn new skills and get a second job. Do not sit around and whine how those with jobs and those who pay taxes owe you anything. They don't. If anything, you owe them. And if we really want to put a stop to domestic violence and sexual abuse, let's go after the actual perpetrators. Don't accept any of the BS excuses of culture or custom or anything else. And you'd be surprised how often these pathetic rationales and excuses are actually trotted out to get out of appalling behaviour or to get out of a jail sentence. Alarmingly, those who ignore or who rationalise the most abhorrent behaviour on the basis of skin colour or ethnicity dare to label the rest of us as racists. And then, of course, we have the various grifters publicly championing fairness and wealth redistribution. It comes under many guises, of course, but it follows the same theme. The rich don't pay enough tax, or the government doesn't do enough for the poor. Even dumber is the "we must raise taxes to pay off the debt" refrain. Here's the big problem: it's all a load of old cobblers. The top 10% of taxpayers already pay over half of all income taxes, and only around 50% of workers pay more in tax than they receive in other benefits. You see, despite the demands from the overpaid rich left moralisers, I'm yet to meet one of them who offers to tip in more of their own cash to the Australian Taxation Office to make their inequality mantra apply to them. More often than not, these public advocates for higher taxes have a variety of personal tax reduction schemes in place, like negative gearing, while whining that others need to actually pay more. And if these economic illiterates think raising taxes are going to pay off the near $1 trillion debt, then I'm telling you, they really are barking mad. Our debt is a product of bad spending, and mostly spending demanded by the same people who want to see taxes raised for everyone else. They are the mendicant left. They want us to spend more on education, but our kids only get dumber. They want more spent on welfare, while fewer people are actually committing to a life of work. They want more shovelled into failing Aboriginal communities with nothing to show for it. And they want insane amounts wasted on terrible defence projects while the bureaucracy grows and grows and grows. We could go on and on about this. If only we gave the government even more of our own money to spend, everything would be fixed. Well, that's rubbish. Our governments waste so much money through pork barrelling or propping up failing programs designed by bureaucrats that we will never, ever pay off our national debt. And frankly, I don't think any future government will intend to. Some may talk about it in a very earnest tone of voice, but believe me when I tell you, not one of them thinks they'll be in office with our debt repaid. It will always be someone else's problem. And given the measurable decline in our standard of living, our economy, our autonomy, our freedom and our rights have all been driven by do-gooder governments, it's hard to make the case why they should actually be doing more of the same. And it's funny, or it seems funny to me, how so many people complain about how bad government is, but then they also demand that it needs to be larger and more interventionist. Why would anyone in their right mind ask for more of a bad thing? Well, the answer to that is simple. No one wants to take responsibility for themselves anymore. And yet that was the key to Australia becoming such a great nation. We had resilience. We helped each other out of a jam voluntarily rather than by legislated coercion. We had pride in being independent of government. Now, too many boast of their ability to get something they don't need at someone else's expense. If we really want to remain the greatest nation on earth, we need to reclaim that sense of patriotism, that civic duty, and that inner pride that comes only from standing on our own 2 feet. As the old saying goes, a government big enough to give you everything you want is a government big enough to take away everything you have.